Welcome everyone. It's a lovely afternoon in Johannesburg, and we're going to talk about the highs and lows of mountaineering and choosing mountaineering as a life. This is the South African Women in Sports Foundation, and we want to explore why mountaineering can be I guess a pursuable sport, hey Sarah? A pursuable sport for women on our continent, for women in general. So stick around, and we'll be talking about how it also impacts our personal lives. So Sarah and I can ask each other, or we'll ask each other a couple of questions, but we'll basically try to cover as many things as possible, which people have been curious about over a long period of time. I want to introduce you to Saray Khumalo, who is South Africa's most high-profile female mountaineer. She's done extraordinary things in her climbing career, and she is the first Black woman in the world to get to the summit of Mount Everest. And she's going to tell us all about that, but also about how climbing impacts her life and how she's promoted climbing, hiking, and that sort of thing in her time as a mountaineer as well. So Saray, welcome. And I guess I need to welcome myself as well, because we don't have a panel interviewer. So I will be doing most of the interviewing, but I also want to encourage you to feel free to ask me questions. I know we've done this before, so on a different platform, but yeah, welcome, Sarah.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Deshun, and thank you for making the time and for inviting me. Super excited. I think climbing, hiking, and outdoors is really for everybody. I'm super excited to actually go out now and see a lot more people that look like me. There's real diversity out there. When I got into it in 2012, when I saw people that are non-white on the hike, I just stopped, greeted, hugged, and tried to find out who they are. Now if I did that, I can't finish a hike.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely awesome. And so we're going to get into that because, you know, we've both had that kind of experience where we find ourselves to be the only Black females in sort of the mountainous regions of the world. So before we get there, you've just kind of given us a bit of an intro about when you started your mountaineering journey. So can you tell us about that? Where did the inspiration come from, first and foremost?
So I grew up in a club called Pathfinders, which really we did camping, we hiked. We didn't even call it hiking. We're like, let's go walk as a group. But it was really almost like the Scouts, where you had these leaders that drilled into you physical activity, making your own bed, making your own shelter. We didn't even have tents. We made our own shelter in the bush. Cooking was for everybody, was kind of some kind of punishment if you did something. So you hated it while it was happening because, you know, my grandparents sent me there. But after you got home, you wanted to go back, you know.
Yeah.
And after a while, you know, growing up, going to varsity and having a family, I lost all that. And at some point, I lost my older sister. So I'm one of 7 girls. I just started going through asking myself my reason for being, and I found myself on the trails. You know, that's how I went back in 2012. I started hiking locally, going into Lesotho, Sunny Pass with a few friends, and did Kilimanjaro, and I haven't looked back since.
Yeah, it's one of those things. I've come across people who climb Kilimanjaro and they're like, I'll never do a thing like that in my life again. And then you get those people who go, oh, I think I should do that again.
Yeah.
You either hate it or you love it, right?
Absolutely.
Our inspiration to start climbing is very different, actually, but it involves grandparents, which is quite interesting. Is that I was introduced to Edmund Hillary as a little girl in this way back in the 70s. You know, I was born in 70, so I grew up with my grandparents, and because of their interest with the British royal family and Edmund Hillary being linked to when Queen Elizabeth became coronated, I grew up on stories of this combination of events for the Commonwealth in their generation. So it was my grandparents also who ignited my interest in climbing, because I heard all these stories of Edmund Hillary. And of course, in those days, I mean, where could you go to ask people about Everest, right? Not in the township anyway, but you know, so I used to get my inspiration from Tintin and all these National Geographic documentaries that would come around every 5 years. There'd be like a big thing on TV about Edmund Hillary's ascent. And then I also found Heidi. I was obsessed with Heidi when I was little. So TV played a big role, and obviously reading, you know, the Tintin comics, it played a big role in my understanding that the mountains are out there. And this idea that one day when I grow up, I actually want to live that life. I want to live like Tintin.
Yeah.
Imagine a girl in the 70s in South Africa's townships going, I want to be like Tintin when I grow up one day.
We can only dream. I guess that's why I'm passionate about literacy and education. I mean, I climb mountains and I use it to raise money for libraries. It's because you can take a child from the township and from the village to New York before they even travel anywhere.
Absolutely.
It's
Yeah.
super equalizer. It plants
absolutely.
seed. Yeah.
I absolutely agree with you, because if it wasn't for the reading that I was doing, especially Tintin, I mean, Edmund Hillary's thing came around every 5 years, but it's the Tintin comics my mum bought me once a month that actually kept me going. And so I absolutely agree with you on that one. So yeah, interesting that our grandparents started it all.
Absolutely. Yeah. Let's blame them.
Let's blame them. So I remember when I climbed my first Everest expedition in 1996, my grandmother was still alive. She was in her 80s at that time. And it was such a special thing for me to show her that, you know, her inspiration had actually led to all of that. And it was an amazing thing for me just to combine the significance of the interest and influence she created in me for climbing and adventure, and this idea that it's now happening when I'm like an adult, and she was still there to witness it. So that was absolutely amazing. Did your grandparents see you form into this person that became an adventurous person?
Yeah, my grandmother. So my grandmother died when she was 101. She was alive. She was alive when I did my first Everest expedition.
Wow.
Unlike you, I don't know if she actually understood it. You know, if my earliest memories of really going into a mountain, which I think was actually a molehill behind our house. It was my hiding place. So I'll go to school and come back, and I'll go and climb this little hill behind our house, because it allowed me to see everybody's
the whole world
and beyond. And I would wonder, what is out there? You know, so I think, unlike you, I didn't grow up knowing that Everest is there to be climbed. I was introduced, funny enough, to Kilimanjaro by someone in the US in 96. I went to visit after having watched Coming to America. So I thought
that's the year that I climbed Everest. Isn't that funny?
And then I realized, they're just like everybody else, because they were asking questions. Do you know my friend in Nigeria and in Ghana? And I'm thinking, dude, you know, until somebody actually said to me, oh, what state is that you come from? I'm thinking, no, you know. And then somebody said to me, have you climbed Kilimanjaro? And I said, no. And they went to town about it. And I thought to myself, that is my story. Why should you be telling me about Kilimanjaro? He made it on my bucket list, and it was there for years. You know, other things to priorities, kids, work, And then until somebody said, let's go climb Kili, or they are going to climb Kili. And I said, it's on my bucket list. Can I come with? And it led to, wow, why don't we use it to raise money? Because then I started reading up on it, and I saw people can actually use this to create awareness. And we raised money for a home in Benoni, Kids Heaven. And obviously I started Summits with a Purpose. I said, you know, I'm going to climb, not just to take a selfie, but to make a difference and change the narrative for the next generation.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think there was an era when one could really connect and link your climbing to something like that without it looking too, I mean, nowadays everyone does this kind of, what do you call it, conscious capitalism or social capitalism and whatever. But there was a time when it was actually quite a genuine thing to say that we are doing this on behalf of. And in fact, I remember our 96 expedition was linked to the Nelson Mandela Children's Foundation. And we were able to bring such amazing, not emphasis, but just the sense of visibility that the Nelson Mandela Children's Foundation was there, and that those children also needed inspiration, and they needed to see heroes that look like them, right? So if I look back now, it's 26 years ago, gosh, where I'm turning 52 this year, and it will be 26 years ago that I climbed Everest, and I turned 26 on Everest. So I kind of did this calculation in my head the other day. And but anyway, so 26 years ago, you couldn't put an all-inclusive South African expedition together. I was literally the only Black person, the only woman for I think about 10 years of climbing. And now I think we are in a position where we can actually show that women of color, people of color are doing this all the time now, you know. So it's such a fantastic transition from the way it was seen back then and to the difference we can make now for the charities that we support, because it really can be seen in a genuine light from that perspective.
Yeah. So the difference between what I started doing, so I paid for all my climbs. So none of the funds that I collected were funding my climbs. I paid for my climbs, and I used the climb to raise money for education. That's very different because for me at the time, I actually didn't know companies fund your climb, because for me, climbing became my holiday. So I'm going to save up for my holiday, but I'll use those funds to pay for myself. But hey, I'm going to climb Kili. Why don't you pay to this charity? And the only thing that I asked is the charities must genuinely be supporting education, and they're comfortable for me to audit them, because I'm raising money on their behalf.
Of course,
which is totally different from somebody that's saying, if you don't fund me, I am not going to climb. You know, and I think there's bad apples everywhere, and I wouldn't really paint it with same brush for everybody. There are people that climb and raise funding for the climb, and also for charity, but they don't need to do that, because there are others that climb and use sponsors' money to climb. You know, I think it's there is genuine people out there that don't have to raise money for anything, but they do that. And climbing gives an opportunity to actually share, inspire people to dig deeper, to see themselves in places where they didn't. When I walked up on Everest the first time, people looked at me and assumed that I must be going to Everest Base Camp, you know. Obviously, right?
I know.
The color and grace factor. I mean, climbing is white male rich, right? Because those are the people that have traditionally done it, and they've been able to afford it. There's also a huge ego thing. You know, testosterone is on the high, right? In that environment, how do you get in there and hold your own? I started with serious imposter syndrome, because after a while I'm like, do I really belong? because people are looking at you and wondering whether you can save them if something went wrong and they are roped with you, whether they should stay away from you. And at the time, the first time I was there with Sibusiso, I'm like, do you know the first Black man to summit Everest? As if by association, he made me more competent than I was.
Yeah.
And subsequently, when I rocked up, I was comfortable with who I was. Because in 2014, which is the first time I got there, I realized after the Sirac fell and killed 16 Sherpas, the people that I held so high as they knew what they were doing, they were just as scared as I was. One of them packed up and ran away from the mountain. And it became a personal journey. It's about me, and it's about representation. It's about ensuring that next time they see somebody that looks like me, they give them the same benefit of the doubt that they give their counterpart. That's all. It's about also putting my foot down to say I belong where I want to belong.
Yeah, and that you belong in all spaces because you're a citizen of the world, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I remember when I also first, for starters, I think people had just never, like, the concept was so foreign to people that a Black woman wants to do this. I was so young. I mean, I turned 26 on Everest. So that was the other thing, was also like, don't you have a husband to go and find? So people just couldn't figure out, like, why would you want to do this? And I guess it was because the framework was the next people who are going to come after the white males are the white females. And there certainly were some females, but the ratio, the male to female ratio 26 years ago was like 1 in 67 is the number that got thrown about, And when I went back to Everest in 2003, it came down. It was something like 1 in the 25s or something like that. But there were still significantly fewer females, and still specifically no Black people, females, whatever. Sibusiso climbed also in 2003 and summited, which is where I met him for the first time. And it was just that thing of, just finding the way to fit without feeling like, the eyes are all on you and you're now needing to sort of show that you're as good as everybody else. For me, that was part of, like, the toughest thing to overcome in my mind, that I must just act like I belong, and not stand out. But it's hard to not stand out. If you're a different color to everybody else.
Those down suits, people hardly see who is who in the zoo.
But they wouldn't from, like, a distance, and then when they kind of get startled. Like, oh my gosh, what am I looking?
It's
there was a lot of that, and so that just, you can't get away from feeling so put on the spot, because now everyone's watching to see if you actually do belong, if you actually do have what it takes to be in that environment, right?
Yeah, and I think if you're not mature and grounded, I think knowing why I was there, after 2014 became so important and so core, because it allowed me not to compete with anybody.
Yeah,
I mean, coming
absolutely.
from the US or Europe, I don't know why you're doing it. I definitely knew why I was climbing. And it was very clear in my mind. So
no, absolutely.
I'm competing with you. But me, who I was yesterday, I picked up stuff from 2014 that people that were doing a lot more cardio were having a better time in the mountains. So I started running, I started cycling. And the excitement for me was, how better am I going to do compared to the previous time? And also, what lesson would everybody that I encounter get from their interaction with me? And I that for me became important, but it also, I suppose, comes with maturity, because sometimes these comments in the dining tent at Everest Base Camp or wherever it is, they do get to you. If there's a decision to say, well, some people must stay, some people must go, especially if you're in an international team, you find that you have to stand up for yourself. Otherwise, you will be the one that's going to be selected to stay.
It's interesting that you say that, because our climbing journeys, especially in the Himalayas, has been different. Mine's always been part of a South African team who did something, right? And so I, apart from being going through a selection process at the first Everest expedition, I was then subsequently invited onto these expeditions. And then I would still find myself being in a space like you just described now, like when people have to decide who gets extra oxygen or who doesn't get extra oxygen. Everyone kind of looks over to you like, nah, we don't actually think you're going to make it. So they don't say it, right? But the assumptions in there is like, we're not going to treat you special, but it's not that. It was literally kind of, don't think because you are representing here that we're going to give you anything more than anybody else. And not like you expect it, but it gets made very explicit that you can't expect it. In one of the cases that I had, a Canadian climber, we became very good friends with a Canadian team next to our tent compound. And this guy came over and said, I just want to like make you a bar one pie. That was his specialty, with a cup of tea. And, you know, we eat a lot of chocolate when we're climbing, right? So I was like, yeah, bar one pie, bring it, you know. But this guy, he got to the point of saying, I brought you over to our camp to apologize to you for how your teammates are treating you.
Wow.
And that for me was, I knew how they were treating me. I didn't need any person to show it to me, but it's that thing of, I was able to manage my own responses in such a way that I was still climbing my own expedition, but I still had to deal with people who invited me to be on expedition with them, who were treating me so badly that someone else noticed and apologized on their behalf. So that kind of thing, to deal with that kind of mental and emotional every single day when you're in the mess tent, snide comments, snarky remarks, you know, a look that comes your way, to deal with all of that at the same time as climbing the world's biggest mountain is the kind of thing that people like you and I get exposed to, and nobody else gets exposed to that, right? So it's like, how do you make your place in the world as a climber while you're dealing with the other mountain, which is overcoming other people's perception of how good you are, whether you belong, whether you don't belong, whether you should even be here. In my case, I was invited onto the team. So you kind of, you get a little blindsided when you find that the invite, look, I don't go into these things blindly. I'm not innocent and naive like that. I knew that I had my own personal goals. That's why I was there. But you do kind of expect a little bit of humanity, maybe a bit of like, acknowledge me as a human being type of thing. And that is the thing I think that's been the highest learning curve, is that it's not necessarily so, even if you get invited.
Absolutely. So I wish I was invited by somebody. Actually, I was invited to the first one by Luazingwenya. They were going to Everest with Sibusiso and another girl called Kasheho. So he invited me to join the team. This is where I realized that actually people get funding to climb mountains. Before then, I didn't know. But we ended up going, just Sibusiso and I. And with the team, so we got a little bit of sponsorship from Discovery, and the rest of the money, we added our own money. The difference was I paid for my own fees. You know, if I was partially funded, okay. And I came there to these people that I didn't know from a bar of soap. And also maybe going back is I was a lot more than 26. So I knew who I was, and I was not going to let respect keep me to at a table where I'm not wanted. I am very comfortable with creating my own table or pushing back and putting people in their place because without being rude and without tampering with the team dynamics, which is important on the mountain.
Yeah, absolutely.
Allowing them to check themselves, you know. At the same time, I hold my own. You know, I was talking to some ladies to say, when you're on the mountain, it's not about being male, female, black, white. It's about
being a mountaineer.
Exactly. You know, because when that Sirac, you know, comes tumbling down.
It doesn't ask if you're a woman first.
Right? It's come there and show up and bring your best foot forward, because that can save you and it can save the other person's life that's in your team. So it's always making sure that I don't allow anybody to say, let me help you with your bag. They're not going to ask a male, can I help you with your bag? Why do you want to help me with my bag?
Exactly.
Because if you allow people and say, oh, he's a gentleman, up the mountain, he has to save himself before he saves you. So be very conscious and deliberate with every step and every reaction that you take. What excites me though, Deshun, is that I'm seeing female guides like Pasang on the mountain that are guiding K2, are guiding, Everest. And I also found, I don't know if this was your experience, that the boys are very strong at lower altitude. They can run and at a higher altitude, the mountain humbles everybody.
It's the great equalizer, right?
Yeah. And over time, as I went up there and came back, I learned more and more. So it didn't bother me how people were behaving at low altitude. Because I knew
I think for me
I'll
also,
see you up there.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, for me also, after a while, I must say those first few years of climbing, it taught, I think it teaches you, it is that maturity thing that you're talking about, because the first few years of climbing, I really was, there were so few females, number one, that you kind of, the only role models I had were these guys, and I was trying to climb like them because I didn't have any other like reference point, right? And I always found myself so exhausted and so stressed and so filled with anxiety. And eventually I actually had a mental coach when I went for my second Everest expedition. And it took a guy to teach me to climb like a woman, I always say, because he helped me to connect with the feminine side of my climbing energy in a way that I didn't ever acknowledge for myself. I always used to think that the way to survive the mountains is to do it like a man would do it. So this guy helped, I think I was 32 at the time. And it really helped me to understand, to make that switch from male to female energy. And I cannot explain to you how that transformed my results, completely transformed my results as a mountaineer. And it was a thing of like, I'm a woman, I'm a female, I have female energy, I climb with everything that female comes with, and that actually enhanced the way I climbed higher, not faster necessarily, but I was able to go higher and more expediently is perhaps the thing to do. Because I tell you what, if you are hauling 48 kilos up Mount McKinley because there are no Sherpas to help you pull your weight, right? It's the female energy that allowed me to take almost 50 kilos and take it up that mountain. And there was just something about that, something about moving from hard energy to soft energy and knowing how to interplay them, because you can't just climb on soft energy either. There are times when the hard energy has to manifest, right? But that, for me, that thing really, really transformed the way I climb, the way I guide. I mean, I'm not quite so stressed when I'm guiding people anymore, and it really does. It gives me amazing, amazing results.
Yeah, it's very interesting that you say that. One of the things that I found is if you are in a group of males and then suddenly you are on your periods, it's a flipping inconvenience for them. Oh my God, this. But this is me. You have to be comfortable with me.
I'm going to do a bit of overshare, but I've had to share a tent with a guy, and that's kind of how I started to be. It's like I just went like, you know what, guys, I'm the only female on the team. I was like, guys, I'm on my period, so just like take that with whatever energy you want to take it. And then I'd be like, to the guy I'm sharing a tent with, I'd be like, just turn over, please. I need to change it. What can you do? You're in a tent. You're on a high mountain. There's nothing around, and there's a storm outside. What can you do?
Yeah. It's also understanding that if they need to pee, they can stand and turn around. Like, turn around.
Absolutely.
Like, you have to go through that process. But I learned very quickly. And again, it's almost when I started that that maybe makes a difference. I was very comfortable with who I was, and I didn't let anybody push me around. And also the fact that I came here because I saved up. I've made lots of sacrifices. You're not going to treat me like I don't have your own prejudices, but they're yours. They're not going to affect how I climb, because if I let them affect how I climb, I lose the game, and I don't achieve my goal. And you never know. And you move on very quickly, the next minute, in fact, without realizing what you've done. I can call out when I think it's beneficial. Sometimes I just ignore it.
Yeah, I ignore pretty much most of the time, because one of the things I've learned is that when I'm on the mountain, my energy needs to go to the mountain. It needs to go to my climb. I need to reserve the energy for what I'm there for. So I could be like, and I've been in for most of my climbing career, been in all male expeditions where I'm the only female. And you just kind of learn to block it out, to not really, because the minute you engage, like I've had to deal with such in-your-face racist comments, in your face. And then I would just kind of like, you know what, I'm out of here, walk out, go sit in my tent, read a book, whatever. But I was just not allowing anyone to, because that's what they sometimes can do. They can reel you in, whether you're female, whether you're different, let's call it that. If you're different, they can sometimes just reel you in and get you into the space where your energy is used incorrectly. So to overcome that mentally is part of the game of being a woman climber, especially if you're a Black woman climber, I think, to this day. I mean, I've been in the game for over 20 years. You've been in the game for a very long time. And to this day, because there's so little representation in the very high regions of the mountain, we will still come across it, But it's so nice that as we grow older, and we can then tell the younger generation that it's not necessarily how you need to handle being in that space.
No, I don't need to climb like a man.
No.
I'm a girl. I'll climb like a girl. And there'll be no instances up there, That's why I actually started protesting against the shiwi. No, I'm not going to stand and pee because that's not me. I'm going to make a plan and actually do it the way that is comfortable for me, because at the end of the day, I mess up everywhere. I have to train in the shower.
And thank God they make more female friendly climbing gear nowadays.
Exactly.
I mean, there used to be a time when I'd walk into a shop and there's like literally nothing built for females, like literally not a single item on the rack. Here or internationally, in Europe or in the US, I was just like, do these people not understand? You need to make gear for women.
Yeah.
But now, thank
there's
God.
There's a lot more female colors. I mean, up to now, actually, the down suit is made for men. I don't know if you know that.
I know.
There's no female down suit.
I know.
But I know some of the big brands are looking at a female down suit.
We're in the 21st century. Like, why has this not happened like 15 years ago already is what I want to know.
Yeah, but I think that's why, Deshun, I look at it and say, I'm not a qualified guide by any means, but I'll lead a team. I know how to choose the right people to guide. And I'm going to be able to manage the expedition for people. I've started doing it in the Drakensberg, taking a whole group of women, because I found myself on the trails. And I would love for other people to be able to find themselves on these trails. You get up on the mountain, you know what, one of the first things that people ask to say, what about your children? I never had anyone ask any of the fathers and grandfathers on the trail, what about your children and your grandchildren? Why is that?
For me, it's like my children get to see me do it. So hopefully they'll be inspired.
Absolutely. And my son actually wrote me a song when I came back, and about how he is proud of me. He's seen that hard work makes the difference. He's seen how I fight for summits with a purpose. And I came back to a different boy than I left. One that was like, I'm going to school.
Absolutely. That is exactly it. And even with the small things, like when I swam the Midmar a couple of weeks ago, my children are swimmers. We're quite a strong swimming family. And so they're on school teams and whatever, and they're still small. I mean, Edward's turning 11 next month and Judith is 8. And he's seen me train for the Midmar, and he's been alongside me in the swimming pool, doing his laps while I'm doing mine. And it only hit him when he was at the event on last Saturday, that he saw where it all culminates to. And up until then, he was kind of like, oh yeah, my mom's swimming with my. Do you know what he said to me afterwards? Is, Mommy, next year I'm in that water with you. And I thought,
Oh wow.
Don't ask me about what about your children. My kids are seeing what it takes to do the work, to get into that water, to get wet, to, to struggle, to sometimes not feel motivated, but I'm doing it anyway. And there's no greater gift to the next generation, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, I was talking to friends about how we all reading about Africa having the youngest population. What is the gift
what
that
are
we are
doing
giving
with that?
population?
Exactly.
What are we as a generation going to leave for this
Absolutely
young generation that we live in the world with? It just goes back to, as part of the process, I think it was 2016, Fikile Mbalula tweeted and said, they've got money to take the first Black African woman to Everest. And I called a few people that I thought, yeah, come on, guys, because after having done it twice before, that chances of anyone climbing, especially when the weather window, are good for anyone, irrespective within the team. So I said, maybe let many of us go. The point is, we just get one that looks like us to the top of the world.
Yeah.
And I got there, and one of, among other reasons why we didn't get that, is the insistence that we need to have a male to guide us.
I mean, look, I've had these
I'm thinking,
conversations.
no, I think we need to do better. And I came back to Everest after the summit, and one of the people was there at the airport, all excited. And I thought, I'm not going to be rude, because I think he's learned from this. He's not going to treat other people that come after me any different because they're female. We don't need to go and borrow testosterone for us to be taken seriously.
Oh, gosh,
I think we're just as committed.
In the days of me trying to find sponsorship, I was in the same position. I'd sit in these boardrooms and people would say, so who's going to take you? And I'd be like, I'm taking me. I've been on the mountain before. I need a couple of Sherpas. But who's guiding you? And I'd be like, I actually have experience on this mountain. I'm climbing the same route. It's not like I don't know what I'm going for, but it's the paradigm, it's the mindset that because you're female and you and I are not big, like muscular built people, so people are, maybe they expect us to grow a beard or something, I don't know, but there's like a real kind of thing that you must prove somehow, and we both are very feminine in our sport, right? Because the sport is so male dominated. So people do expect that you're going to have a kind of aura of masculinity or something like that. And I'm like, no, this is me. I'm female. I climb like a woman. I'm feminine, and I'm deliberately feminine. But I also can do this. I can carry heavy loads and go up to high altitudes.
Absolutely.
But,
I guess it's also, if you look at the history, whether it's in the 50s when they started climbing, it was always males. And if you look at some of the clubs locally that are in the outdoor spaces, they're not transformed. There are a few people that are trying to transform these clubs. They're not transformed. And I think it's time for people funding these organizations to start demanding real transformation. Not this thing of let's invite you like your experience, and then when we get on the mountain, we're actually not serious about seeing it through. I think that's what's wrong with the world.
The lip service is exactly, and transformation can't happen without conscious effort. Number one, it is conscious effort. It's a sense of purposefulness as well. The transformation will not happen without a sense of purposefulness. So if we just invite people, sorry, I'm going to mention names now, but I've not been a member of the Mountain Club ever in my life for my own reasons. But it's that idea of, oh, look, we at least have that one, and I'm like, no. If you really want to show transformation, go into areas where you get, just like I think Cricket South Africa's done, and you can see how over time the sport has transformed. Rugby South Africa, there's a whole bunch of ways that sports that have been white male dominated have been transformed, because eventually they realize that a conscious effort needs to be made and you can't just tokenize people. And I'm really so past being tokenized. There was a time I was young, I was stupid, I just wanted to be in the mountains, I agreed to being tokenized. And so the time for that is over, so we really need to find, I suppose for me, it's like, how do I find the way to get them to see that just having one person on a board, it doesn't do the job, really. Be intentional.
Yeah, so unlike you, so I had all these stories about the Mountain Club, and I had a different approach. I went and joined because people say stuff, it's their experience. I need to have my own. So I went and joined. I paid my fees. And when it came time to that tweet that I told you about, one of the feedback that we got, although it wasn't given directly to me, was that they did not support a female, or a Black female, to be given funding. And I thought to myself, this is the club that I belong to. Does someone have the decency of actually maybe approaching me when I pay fees? And I started engaging, and I realized that it's very niche. And Deshun, I'm a believer in, if you're not welcome at the table, create your own, because you have a table. And this is why through Summits with a Purpose and Malet, we actually raise funds. We are training guides in the Drakensberg.
Yeah.
We need to train guides that are competent.
That's exactly what I'm getting at, is that sometimes for me, I don't like to put my energy into a fight that is like totally, I need to decide where I park my energy, right? And for me, the best way to use my energy is to show it can be done. Yes. And that's what you're doing as well. You're like, okay, if my initiatives won't be accepted over here, I'll show you over here.
Yeah, exactly.
They got own spaces, right?
But at the same time, there are very good people that I've met in the Mountain Club.
Of course, no, it's the institution. I'm not talking about individuals. It's the way the institution was initially set up, and how that part of it has not transformed. Some of the old paradigms have really not transformed. I mean, when I was selected to be on the first Everest expedition, some people came up to the leader, and I mean, we all have our issues with the leader of that expedition, and I have my own. But at the time, people were like, how can you choose this person? She's not a member of the Mountain Club. You'll find the best talent there. At the time, the Mountain Club did not even consider getting Black people to join. It was like, how can you say that this must be the way to select people, but actually it's so exclusive that only that select of people? And to his credit, to this day, I'll credit him, he was the only person at that time that said, I'm going to give her a chance because I can see that she wants to be there and that she has the aptitude to be there. He was the only person who did that. And so you do need those kind of champions who are in that sense of like exclusivity and privilege to stick their neck out and say, I will be the person to stick up for you, and you just don't get that. So I don't want to go in and fight and find the person. Like you, create your own space and do it and show it can be done. And hopefully eventually someone will peer over the wall of privilege and say, oh my goodness, they seem to be doing a little over there. I don't know.
You know what is important
is require funding as well.
Deshun, if I look at the women of the 50s, they said enough is enough and walked up to the union buildings. Yeah. And that's why today we have some of the privileges, because that definitely had its own impact among other things. The question is, what is the next generation going to appreciate about you and I? I think it's the representation. It's
I think absolutely. Absolutely.
Can I just give you a simple example? I had somebody that was training me, very old, John, at Virgin Active when I was still a member there. John said to me when he discovered that I was the first Black African woman to summit Everest, and he said, I hope you don't get offended, but if my father were to wake up this day and find that someone like you summited Everest and somebody is a Black female jet pilot, I think he'll faint. Then I said, why? He says, no, he grew up in Rhodesia, he said. And at one point he went home and he said to the father, I saw a black woman driving. And the father said, you must never, no one must ever hear you say that, because these people can't do that. And he says, if he were to wake up today, he would wonder, he would wonder, because then they're everywhere. And I just said, no, I'm not offended, but I appreciate your comment, because
no, I agree with you.
I understand where you're coming from. But the young white male or female, there is no excuse.
No, absolutely. And you know, for me, it's like, show it can be done. So if you look at the best female Olympic swimmer at the moment, black female. If you look at the best indoor speed skater at the moment, black woman. If you look at the best gymnasts in the world at the moment, black female. If you look at the best ice skater, indoor ice skater at the moment, black female. The thing is, our people need to see it can be done.
Yeah.
Bottom line. And so sometimes we'll fail, sometimes we'll get criticism, people will misinterpret us. The point is, it needs to be seen that it can be done. And for me, that is my investment in the next generation, because you and I both, we speak at schools, kids come up to us afterwards and say, how can I become a mountaineer? Oh my goodness, I want to do this one day. Such a privilege to be able to put the seed into those young hearts and minds. My seed came through a grandmother, yours did as well. But now they can see people actually doing it. And I think that, you know, the compound interest that comes from us and the next generation actually doing more of them doing it. And for me, the compound interest is, it's not just that one black Olympic swimmer. It's that somewhere along the line, you'll see a pool full of Olympic swimmers, just like you see Lewis Hamilton breaking ground in F1, just like you're seeing, Serena Williams breaking ground in tennis, the Williams sisters. And it's that compound effect that the world can see. This is not a black and white issue. It's the people belong in spaces and they can show how good they are and that they're trying in spaces regardless of who they are. And
it's representation. That's what it is.
Yes,
and for me,
absolutely.
I mean, one of the stories that I didn't tell you is, growing up, you had Tintin. I watched cartoons a lot. And at some point, I did not believe that I can be a superhero, because all the heroes I saw on TV, didn't look like me. No one around my neighborhood was flying, you know?
Yeah.
So it's that, realizing that we need to represent, whether it's on the mountain, whether it's in cricket, so that our children have choices, just like any other child. That's what I get excited about. Look, I'm not American by any means. I got excited about Obama getting into office, because that child believes that, oh, so I can be anything. He's not just saying it, or she's not just saying it, she's seen it.
Yeah.
You know, Kamala, it's Serena Williams that you've just mentioned. It's just important that wherever it is that we are, whether we're black or female, we realize that it's important to show up in the right way. There's something,
Absolutely.
so I do executive coaching as well. There's 3 acronyms that I say to people: VIP. Be a VIP wherever you are, whether you're in the boardroom or on the mountain. Be visible, be intentional, and be present all the time.
Yep, love it.
Not
Love
about
it.
you. It's about you and the rest that are coming along. Because when somebody says those people are lazy, it's because they saw one person.
Yeah.
So what are they going to say, I beg your pardon, after they see you, after they interact? So remember to be a VIP, whether you're black, white, female, male, you know, because that's, you know, another thing is, I've been in the corporate world for very long. By the way, I'm retiring end of this month. And one of the things that I found interesting is a white male, young, would walk in, can do 50% of the job, but they'll talk themselves confidently into getting the job. And you see a CV of a female, white or black, And they are apologetic about their CV, and they can do 100%.
Especially South Africans. Oh my goodness, we've got to get South African women to stop saying sorry. Sorry, can you please tell me the time? I'm sorry I'm doing this. I'm sorry I'm sitting at this table. Have you noticed it's so part of our conditioning that South African women are always sorry? And I've actually had to say this to a very, very brilliant scientist friend of mine. She always just be like, I'm sorry to inconvenience you, Deshun, but what is the time? And I'm like, you're not inconveniencing me. It's such a normal thing to ask for the time, stop saying sorry. And it is, you're quite right, because even if we are visible, if we're visible sorry, then actually you're not making the impact.
No, that's why I'm very excited
sorry, I'm
about
on this mountain. I shouldn't be climbing here.
Yeah, that's why I'm very excited. I got excited that we're getting involved in the No Apology for My Success campaign.
Yes.
Because believe it or not, after Everest, I actually got these things. Let's stop talking about it now. It's enough now.
Yeah, and I went through that as well.
Growing up, we always, if you did something that was amazing, wait for others to applaud you. Don't talk about it too much. Like, move on. No, I'm not going to apologize for my success. I worked hard for it. The 3 times that I was unsuccessful at summiting, I was asked over and over, oh, shame, it didn't happen. So what happened? Now I must talk about it. Now when I'm successful,
now you can't.
No.
I did that for myself. I got sick of being asked about Everest because I've climbed so many other mountains, number one. And number two, I was actually really, truly, I was capable of so many other things, So my professional world has not been in corporate, but I've been working with corporates for over 20 years in terms of training and personal development and all of these things. And I knew that I could give more, I suppose, gravitas to the work I'm doing. But the minute people found out that I had been on this, even just the slopes of Everest, as you know, I mean, you've been to the top and I've been quite close, but the minute they find out that I've just been on the slopes of Everest, they'd be like, oh, no, that's interesting, but come tell us about Everest. And I'd be like, please, man, I'm trying to earn a living here. So I went through the same thing of, I don't want to talk about Everest. I went through years and years, and eventually I just realized I can't get away from it. Number one, people are interested, but number two, how do you maximize and monetize the idea that that's what people want to hear about, right? So it was a tough transition for me because I could see the men were doing it so much easier. And I also noticed that people who had never been on a mountain are doing consulting work, talking about climbing Everest. And I was like, wake up. You've actually been there, so like
yeah no, but I'm doing that. I'm doing executive coaching. I'm incorporating the many lessons, as you know, and metaphors about climbing in order to,
and it's so powerful,
leadership to go through this transition that we're going through. How do you get up and still keep going? How do you show up as a leader? Because on the mountain, the decisions that you make, how you show up, can cost your life and somebody else's life.
Absolutely.
That is powerful. I know in business it's
so
about
powerful.
Money, but how do you show up in a way that ensures that the team dynamic is right for your summit, for the success that you do? And I think you're right. I think it's optimizing. I believe that Everest has given me a gift, and I'm not apologetic about it. I know other people have climbed, but they've got their experience, and they can use their experience.
But everyone's absolutely, and everyone's perspective of it. Yeah, so I mean that's the point, right? Is that everyone's perspective of it brings a fresh, new understanding of the thing itself. So 20 years ago, we approached Everest in a specific way. 50 years ago, they approached it. By the time you got to the summit of Everest, there was a whole other way of approaching the mountain. So someone actually asked me this question once. They were like, oh, now that Sibusisi's made it to the top of Everest, maybe you should think of other things to do. And I'm like, no, nobody ever says to Tiger Woods or some other person, oh, there's another black player, maybe you should just not play anymore. Nobody does that. Nobody does that to men. Nobody says to a guy, there's another player on the golf course, maybe you shouldn't play anymore. I just found it the most bizarre thing to say.
Yeah. I think it's not appreciating why you were climbing, or why I'm climbing is completely different to why the next person is climbing.
Precisely.
I'm not climbing. In fact, I don't know if you know that. I didn't know that you had not summited. I didn't know no Black African woman had summited Everest. For the
it's
longest
because of
time.
how people interpret that information. You know, once you say you've been on Everest, people are like, oh, she climbed to the top. I cringe to this day. I get introduced by people who've not bothered to double check with me. They introduce me as the woman who climbed to the top of Everest. And I'm like, oh, gosh, how long is it going to take?
So now for me, it's the first, because Sophia is classified as Black American.
As the first Black,
so I correct people. I mean, when we started,
no, you have
the
to.
Black woman, Black African, because if she's Black,
because it happens so easily. Exactly, it happens so easily, and I knew that you're the first Black African woman. But it's amazing how, and that happens to me all the time. I mean, it's like. And I'm sure this happens to you too, where people go, oh, this is that woman who climbed Kilimanjaro. And you're like, I did, but... you know, so there's a lot of that to kind of overcome in the way people perceive either your success or failure, because failure is part of climbing. And how do you take that and still do something about it and do something with it? I spent time in front of audiences say, you know, like when I make the point about failure, I'd say, like, I'm standing in front of you telling you how I have not climbed Everest. And you can see some people kind of visibly kind of shift. But the point is, if you have climbed the slopes of the mountain, have you not learned something? There's really just about that 20 minutes on the summit, you know. So I really, really jar people with that disclosure that actually, if someone ran in the Olympics and they got the silver medal, did they not work as hard in their prep as the person who got the gold? It just happens to be on that day, certain things didn't go well for you, or you a second short or whatever. But it's that thing of, don't discard the lessons that come from the bronze medalist and the other people who qualified to be there, because most of us in the world are those people, right? The people who tried. And so for me, that part, that's why one of my registered trademark talks is tackling the summit, is like, literally, let's talk about the slopes. Let's talk about, most of us will experience the slopes before we experience anything else. What is that like? You know, how do you cope with it when you see others are succeeding, when you see yourself not making something happen and you've worked so hard for it? So I know this talk is more about our climbing careers, but I think part of what I've heard people also say is like you know, oh, are you still talking about Everest? Like, are you doing other things? Or are you still riding that Everest wave, Deshun?
That's actually funny, because that's all people want to hear. I mean, I came back after the pandemic. I did the last degree to the South Pole. And one of the interesting things is, I went there thinking, I've done Everest, how hard can this be? You know what I say about the South Pole? It's never rest. People are not interested.
No, they're not. They want to hear about Everest.
And that's what they want you to talk about. I'm pursuing the Explorer Grand Slam, as you know. And I talk about it, but people would go and say,
they want to hear about Everest.
They want to hear about Everest. It is what it is, but it doesn't stop me being an explorer that I am.
Absolutely.
I want to go and see other mountains. I want to take people to experience it. I think maybe the question, Deshun, is how do we change the playing field so that it's comfortable, it's easier for other women, Black or male, to get into this space? I think we've paid school fees. Other people don't have to. I think maybe that's a question that we should tackle and actually do something about, because just going on and talking about it, which many people did for years. In fact, it was pay me so much money before I even give you advice on how to climb Everest, which is nonsensical. Now it's on social media. NIMS has made 14 peaks doable for the man on the street, and that is exciting. In a different time. The people that climbed Everest a long time ago, they may talk about, oh, it's now rocked up, it's now easy. What should people that lived 100 years ago say about us today it's easy. They just drive to, to Pretoria. It takes them 30 minutes. We used to walk. I mean, get over yourself, We've got equipment. I mean, I've actually lifted the oxygen tank that was used in 1953. It's heavier than me carrying 2 oxygen tanks today.
Yeah.
Should I carry the one in 53 because I want to prove something? No. I'm going to climb like a girl, and I'm going to use all the equipment that's made it comfortable and easier and safer for me to climb. And I'm not going to apologize about that. So people must get over themselves. And
absolutely.
Is important.
Yeah. And I mean, that's been the thrust of our conversation, is that, it's the paradigm shifts that we all have to undergo. So there was that paradigm shift from white privileged male climbs mountains to black females climb mountains to young people. I mean, the youngest Everest climber, it blew my mind. And then people who climb it in a speedy ascent, so it's like the paradigm shifts need to happen. And I like your question is, what are we doing after having paid the school fees to help the next generation find an easier path? Because that's really, so we need to find ourselves in spaces and creating spaces like you're doing, where we can influence whether that is in fact happening. And to pass the baton to a younger generation of people who are saying, look, I know you guys did it like that, but hey, here's another one. And in many ways, you and I are from 2 very different climbing generations, because just because of how things moved in a 15-year period in terms of climbing, all this, like when I started climbing was a very nationalistic, we must plant our flag type of thing. And in that period, it transitioned into commercial style climbing. And so for me, that transition ushered in a new generation of climbers. But it wasn't like that before. So it's that thing of what ushers in this next generation. I'm so excited about the Sherpa brothers who are doing the 8,000ers, and they just come back from Antarctica. And I mean, there was a time when the Sherpas were literally just there to carry your heavy pack. Look at how those guys are trailblazing. And rightly so. I mean, the Himalaya belongs to them.
Yes,
and they need to show that they are the true heroes of that region, right? Yeah. So who are the regions of the African mountains? Who are the heroes of the regions that we are supposed to be climbing in? Are we really just the guys who carry the heavy packs? And for me, that becomes the challenge. Is like, how do we showcase the talent that already exists in Africa of people who know the mountains really well, but need the resources that these Sherpas now have to showcase their capability in other regions of the world?
Yeah. I think that's one of the things that pushed me through Summits with a Purpose to start getting funding to train the guys that were born at the foot of the Drakensberg.
Yeah, for sure.
We don't have enough jobs in Joburg and Cape Town, in the cities, for everybody. They can create an economy by going up their backyards and taking us, city dwellers, up there.
Absolutely.
We just need to equip them so that they can do it safely, so that they can get the skills that are needed to be able to support that.
Yeah.
Because if you look at Nepal, some of those Sherpas didn't really go to school. Some of them did, some of them didn't. But they are actually contributing significantly to the GDP of the
and they know the region better than anybody. That's the starting premise.
They can create an economy, within that environment. So what are the mountains, whether it's the Mahalis, which is why I was excited about the hike that I did today. It's young people in a village that have taken the mountain behind them, learned how to create trails, and created a trail, created a space for you to park your car safely, and they actually guide you up. And they tell you about, this is where, when the Anglo-Boer War happened, this is where they were settling. They know the region in and out. They take you to a place, this is the fountain where the water that is supplying the village is coming from. I was so proud this morning. I was like, oh my God, this is awesome. This is what we should support.
That's it. That's awesome. So, we both alluded to the fact that we're mums, and just this whole thing of juggling life and work. And for me, it's like being in a marriage, having children, running a business, and then there's climbing and all the other stuff. What is that like for you?
The simple answer is it's a question of priorities. What is important to you? We all have 24 hours. What are you going to allocate to what? And it's choices. There are choices that I've had to make in terms of what is least important, and I'm not going to focus on it. So for my corporate job, 8 hours belongs to my boss because they put food on the table. I give that to the company. I have 16 hours. How much of that am I going to use to sleep? How much of it is for my family? How much of it is for me? And for me, what does that mean? Does that mean me chilling with friends and taking myself to the spa all the time? Or does that mean training so that I can be ready to do what is really important to me, summit with a purpose? So it's about choices. I think you can't do everything, but you can transition from one thing to the next. What is important to you in that specific moment? Is it music? If it's music, how much time in your day are you going to actually allocate to it? Are you going to be consistent? And I find that getting accountability partners in different spaces becomes important. The other thing that, I climb mountains on my own, not with my family, but I acknowledge the fact that it's a family sport.
Without them, you can't
worried as I am on the mountain, but maybe more so because they don't see the realities that I see. If anything happens to me, the world will not miss anything. They will miss something. Their lives will change forever. And that's something that I actually have to take in and work with them through the process effectively, especially after the first attempt and I came back and said, people actually died. They're like, whoa, this could have been you, and it just became real. So I actually prioritize things, and there are sacrifices that I've made over time based on what used to be important to me and no longer important.
Sure. And so the thing about encouraging younger women, from my perspective, I was single when I did most of my climbing. I have done a few climbs as a mom, but my kids are young. So there's also just that thing of school meetings, sports meets, play dates, all these other things that kids' lives are taken up with. And as a mom, I have to prioritize that, because that's the space that my life is in. But what I want to encourage younger women is that if you can do as much of your climbing as possible while you're single, you have all the time in the world, right? Because there's just that less people dependent on you for the energy and the time and the space that is required. But as moms, you and I both are juggling the responsibilities of that, but also the responsibility of the work that we've signed up for. In my case, running a business and obviously still trying to pursue climbing. I think people would be very interested to know, like, if you're deciding to make climbing such an important part of your life, what is the thought process behind that?
I think as I'm listening to you, I feel that my family, especially my boys, have grounded me on the mountain. You know about summit fever. I say I take life-preserving steps. There are people, I'm not going to take unnecessary risks. People say this is the daredevil thing. No, you can die on N1 just driving. So that I cannot control. And if it happens on the mountain, it happens on the mountain.
You sound like me.
Because I wanted to climb at all costs, because the mountain will always be there. And the slopes that you were talking about, the lessons that you take from every climb. And that's why I always say, actually, this whether it's a success or a failure, I'm going to decide. I'm not going to let other people make that decision for me. People always say, oh, but you failed in 2014, 2015. No, I gained so much more. 2019 was a successful.
It was a culmination,
because of all the lessons and all the work that I put into 2014, 15, and 17. And I think appreciating that becomes very important. Should people do this only when they're single? I don't believe so. People should do it when they have the right support. Because even when you're single, you're part of a family. You know, I think if you have a support network, that is important, because you're going to climb Everest, I guess, and the 8,000, and most of them are the longest, where it takes 2 months. But I see people now are sleeping in hypoxical tents and doing it in 8 weeks. Not 8 weeks, in 4 to 6 sometimes. Things are changing. If it's really important to you, make a plan, surround yourself with the right people that will support your vision. Because if we start saying, oh, but then when you are married, then we're saying mothers can't do certain things. And I think that's not right.
I think it's a timing thing, because as a mom, like I remember when Mandy Ramsden went up the 7 summits, I was busy breastfeeding my second baby, and I was like, oh, I'd really like to be there. But it was that thing of, you can't just leave your baby behind and go climb a mountain, right? So for me, the reason I say that it's a timing thing. It is about the support. It is about having the right people around you. And I'm climbing now again, but there just is that time. And as a single person, I found that I had the time to allocate to doing it where no one else was dependent on me being around, like children tend to be. So I'm definitely not saying mothers don't climb, because then I'd be going against what I'm doing. But you're quite right. I think if you go, do I have the right support network? Is the timing right? Can I prioritize this thing in my life versus another thing right now? Then absolutely. I mean, that for me is great.
Fantastic. Yeah. This was, look at the time. This was an amazing I'm absolutely loving it.
Yeah, me too. It's been so wonderful to connect with you on a different platform. And I think this time our audience are perhaps people who are interested in climbing and knowing what, the ins and outs of it, what it entails, how you raise the funds for it. We've both had different ways of raising the funds, and I think that's important to know as well. And just the thing of work-life integration, climb life integration is what I call it. So I'm not sure the direction that you're going to go, but I've literally over the years found a way to kind of incorporate it into what my business can do for customers. So in 2018, we drove from Joburg to Kilimanjaro, climbed the mountain because I was helping a customer to launch a digital brand. And it was an adventure, and again, I'm a mom. I left my kids behind with husband. But the thing is, it is about how can you bring it into your life in a way that makes you be able to pursue the thing that you're still wanting to pursue in terms of climbing, and still be all those other things. Perhaps not as easy said than done, but like you said, prioritization is very important there.
Absolutely.
As well.
I strongly believe in that. Having said that, it's one of the reasons I've taken early retirement, because my dream, Deshun, is to inspire other people to be the best that they can be. And it may not be about climbing Everest or climbing a mountain. Just be on top of your life, because I believe very strongly that we are all uniquely extraordinary, and being ordinary is a choice. Yes. So what my interest is and what yours is are two different things. But you are going to be the best at it because you lean into your strength. And if I lean into mine, that also helps me that way. So I'm incorporating my climbs into my coaching business. I'm guiding or leading people on mountains that I've done, but I'm also supporting other young people that have ambitions to become guides, and using them to actually do this. Whether it's Mafadi around the Drakensberg, I'm taking the first group of women to Kilimanjaro in August.
That's so exciting, eh? We might actually see each other on the slopes. I've got a client who's also thinking of going up, an all-female group as well. So hopefully our female groups can find a time to be together. Do you know which route you're going to climb?
So yes, we've decided on Rongai, and we actually want to.
Oh, I love Rongai.
Yeah, we want to put in extra days, and I'm like walking the journey with them. We started September last year in terms of training, keeping each other accountable. It's Jeanette McGill and I are actually leading, and
that's amazing.
Yeah.
Awesome. So yeah, so we might see each other. There's a new route that I heard about, and we're trying to see if that's a possibility for us. But if Rongai is it, we haven't decided yet. The customer literally came to me about a week and a half ago, and I was like, oh, okay, there's still time. But there'll be some hard training coming up ahead, and so maybe we'll see each other on the slopes.
Always fun in training, absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Sarah, thank you so much for your time. I know that you've had a hectic hike today and you've got other things to go and do. I need to go cook supper. Priorities, eh?
Priorities, yes.
And
my youngest son, by the way, just went to varsity, just finished.
I know.
Trip. So now incredible. I don't cook supper. I'm like, who's cooking
free
supper
agent. Yeah, no, that's really fantastic. So let's see if we can catch up again. I think we need to do a coffee that's offline. But yeah, it'll be lovely to share some notes and see what projects we're all about. But yeah, thanks so much for agreeing to this time. I'm glad it was more conversational than interviewee. And I think we both got to know each other a little bit better this time around as well. Than we've had on other occasions. So thanks a lot for your time and for sharing such an inspiring journey with us. And thanks for allowing me to do the same.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Thank you, Deysel.
So thank you so much for joining us. We had a great discussion. I think Sarah and I can probably go on for another 3 hours. But hopefully you got something out of our discussion. Hopefully it was inspiring. We really are both passionate about climbing. We've each got our own journey, and that's important, that everyone's journey is different. But our hope and wish is that through this conversation, we've been able to ignite some interest and planted some seeds for those who are interested in climbing. Thank you for joining us. If you have any questions, please put them in the comment section. We'll try our very best to respond to each one of them. But we hope that we're going to see you on the slopes one of these days. Cheers.